She was left at the river with twins until a cowboy rode in and said, "Not today." The river was swollen that spring, brown water rolling fast with branches, leaves, and the restless moan of the current. Clara sat on the sandbar where someone had left her. No, where someone had abandoned her, and her arms were full of crying. The twins pressed against her chest, their tiny fists like birds fluttering against skin already worn thin by hunger. She rocked them, murmuring nonsense through lips cracked with thirst. The world smelled of wet clay and rot. The river did not care that she had begged for mercy. The river did not care that her husband's family had turned her away, calling. Her cursed for bearing 2 mouths instead of 1. A woman with twins was an omen, they'd said. One child belonged to God, the other to the devil. Let the river choose. So here she was, skirt muddied, hair tangled with grass, a torn shawl slipping down her shoulders. She had whispered to herself that she wouldn't cry. But the babies wailed, and her tears slid anyway, mixing with river water until she couldn't tell the difference. She thought about slipping into the current, 1 step, 2, and the pain would stop. The twins would float back to God or be carried somewhere kinder. She almost rose when the earth shuddered faintly with the sound of hooves. At first she thought it was her imagination, but then a shadow broke over her, long across the sand. A horse stood at the bank, nostrils flaring, breath a hot cloud in the cool dawn. On its back was a man with dust on his boots, hat pulled low, a revolver at his hip. His voice came steady, like someone who, "New storms, not today." Clara froze. Her arms tightened around the infants as though the stranger might take them too. The cowboy swung down, boots sinking in the damp earth. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, but his movements were gentle. He crouched so his eyes met hers. "You're not alone," he said. His gaze flicked to the twins. "They're hungry." She almost laughed, bitter and sharp. Hungry didn't begin to describe it. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Still, something in his tone cracked her defenses. She stared back, searching for mockery or threat, but saw only tired honesty. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Name's Eli Callahan." He tipped his hat slightly. "I've seen too many graves by rivers to let another form here." The twins fussed, rooting at her blouse. Heat crawled up her neck. She wanted to scream at him to leave, to save himself from her shame. But her legs trembled, and the weight of 2 small bodies made every breath sharp. He looked at her like a man deciding something final. "You got a choice," he said softly. "Stay here and let the river write your ending, or ride with me and find another chapter." Her heart clenched. She didn't trust men, hadn't since her own bloodkin spat her out like refuse. But the river roared behind her, and the babies didn't deserve that kind of grave. She lowered her eyes to the twins. One had fallen asleep, lips slack, while the other rooted still, restless. They were so small, so alive. Her voice cracked. "I can't carry them both." Eli stood, extending a hand. "Then let me carry them with you." For the first time that day, Clara didn't feel like the ground beneath her would crumble. She reached up, her fingers brushing his calloused palm. He lifted her as though she weighed no more than the shawl slipping from her shoulders. The horse snorted, stamping once. Clara held the twins tighter as Eli steadied her on the saddle, climbing up behind to guide the reins. The river's roar faded as they moved, but inside Clara it still thundered. She leaned her cheek against a baby's downy hair and whispered, "We're not done yet." The prairie opened before them, endless, harsh, and waiting. Clara had no idea where the trail led, only that it was away from the river, away from death. Behind them, the current swallowed their footprints, erasing the place where despair had almost taken root. For the first time in weeks, Clara let hope slip into her lungs, fragile as the morning light cutting through mist. She didn't know if she trusted this cowboy. She didn't know if she could trust anyone. But she knew one thing with marrow-deep certainty. She had been abandoned, cast aside like driftwood. Yet someone had ridden up, looked her in the eye, and said, "Not today." Eli's horse, a dun mare with a scar across her flank, carried the four of them steady through prairie grass that rippled gold in the morning sun. Clara clung to the twins, one against each shoulder, while Eli's arm rested behind her, close, but not confining, guiding the reins. She hadn't spoken since they'd left the river. Her throat still felt raw from crying, and her mind swirled with the echo of his words. Not today. It was a promise she didn't dare believe. "Where are you taking me?" she finally asked, voice small against the steady rhythm of hooves. "Nearest. Settlement," Eli said. "Place called Dry Creek. Got a doctor, church, a few kind folks, maybe a bed for you and the little ones." She almost asked if kindness was real anymore, but the baby stirred in her arms, whimpering. The sound clawed at her heart, sharper than hunger in her own belly, Eli noticed. "There's a creek ahead. We'll stop, water the mare, and get those little bellies filled best we can." They reached it soon after, a shallow stream whispering over rocks. Eli dismounted first, then helped Clara down. Her legs trembled so badly she nearly dropped to the earth, but he steadied her with hands that knew work and restraint. She laid the twins on her shawl, knelt, and cupped water to her lips. Cold relief slid down her throat. When she looked up, Eli was pulling a small leather pouch from his saddlebag. He crouched and offered her a strip of dried venison. "It ain't much, but better than nothing." She hesitated, shame pinching her chest. She wanted to ask why he'd give food to a stranger, but the smell of meat silenced pride. She tore a piece and chewed slowly, passing a softened shred between her fingers to one infant's lips. The baby suckled weakly. Eli watched in quiet. His eyes, blue-gray, like steel before rain, softened when the baby latched. "Strong little thing," he murmured. Clara pressed her lips together, afraid that if she spoke she'd break. She hadn't heard anyone call her children strong. Not cursed, not burdens. Strong. When the babies quieted, Eli packed the pouch again and sat back on his heels. "What's your name?" She stiffened, clutching the twins closer. Names had become dangerous, whispered in gossip, used as weapons by those who wanted her gone. But his gaze held steady, not demanding, only waiting. At last, she whispered, "Clara." "Clara," he repeated, like he was making room for it inside himself. He nodded once. "Good. Then, Clara, we best move. Dry Creek ain't far, but the prairie don't give favors." They rode on. By noon, the sun was fierce, bleaching the land and making the horizon shimmer. Clara's eyes burned. Still, she kept the twins shielded, her shawl stretched over their tiny faces. Eli guided the horse with patience, letting her rest when her arms grew too heavy. As Dry Creek came into view, a scattering of weathered buildings, smoke curling from chimneys, Clara's breath hitched. Fear returned, curling cold in her gut. She remembered the way her in-laws spat at her feet, neighbors muttering witch under their breath. What if this town was the same? The mare's hooves clattered on the main street. A few men looked up from the saloon steps, their eyes sharp with suspicion. Women paused, buckets in hand, staring at the sight of a stranger woman with 2 infants clutched to her chest, riding behind a man they all knew. Eli tipped his hat at them, his expression unreadable. "Ignore the stares," he muttered low. "They've seen worse." But Clara felt every gaze like a stone. She wanted to shrink, to vanish. One of the babies whimpered, and a woman whispered, lips curling, "Twins." Her face burned. She started to tighten her grip, to beg Eli to turn the horse around, but then he straightened in the saddle. His voice rang out clear across the street. "Miss, Clara and her children are under my protection," he said, slow and deliberate. "Any man or woman got issue with that, they can take it up with me." Silence spread. A poker chip clattered inside the saloon. No one spoke. Clara's heart hammered, stunned at the shield he had thrown around her with nothing but words. Eli nudged the horse toward the livery. "Come on. You'll rest tonight, and tomorrow we'll see what's next." As they passed the staring eyes, Clara held her head a little higher. She still felt small, bruised by the world, but for the first time she wasn't walking into it alone. And though she didn't know what next meant, she knew one truth now. Eli Callahan's promise was real, at least for today. By sundown, Dry Creek's doctor, an angular man named Merritt with spectacles that slid down his nose, had listened to the twins' chests and declared them scrappy as barn cats. He left a small vial of laudanum for pain, a wrapped paper, of willow bark for fevers, and one stern admonition to keep them warm and fed. Eli paid with a silver dollar and a promise to fix Merritt's porch rail. Clara tried to refuse the charity of it, but Eli only touched the brim of his hat and said, "A man's work is coin enough." They did not stay in town. Eli borrowed a wagon board and a coil of rope from the livery and led Clara 2 miles out, along the creek to an old line cabin he'd used in winter branding years back. It leaned like a tired man against a couple of cottonwoods, roof patched with tar cloth and hope. Grass hissed around its ankles. The door hung on one hinge. Inside it smelled of dust and ash and mouse. "Give me an hour," Eli said. "You and the little ones sit in the shade there. I'll make her fit for sleeping." Clara spread her shawl and set the twins down carefully. The creek talked itself along the stones, small and tireless. She watched Eli's back move with a patience that was almost a prayer, lifting boards, straightening the door, tamping the stove with dry twigs until smoke curled blue instead of black. He hammered by rhythm, not anger. Each strike steadied, something loose in her chest. At dusk, he came to the cottonwoods with a lantern and a half-smile. "It ain't the Palace Hotel, but it's 4 sound walls and a stove that draws." The shelter was rough as knuckles, but when Clara stepped inside, the lantern light made the spaces look honest, not poor. Eli had set the mattress with a folded blanket at the foot, swept out nests of leaves, and hung a tin cup on a nail above the basin like an invitation. On the crate beside the bed lay a small book with a broken spine and a stub of graphite. "Found. That in the cupboard," he said, catching her look. "Ledger, I think. Some drover's tallies." Clara touched the brittle pages as if the past might crack. "I haven't written in, I don't know." "Then write," Eli said, quiet. "Write the names you want this place to remember." That night, after the twins fed and slept in turns that left her eyes gritty, she set the ledger in her lap and printed slowly, careful as stitching. Pearl for the girl with the soft whimper, Jessie for the boy who never let go of her finger. She wrote her own name next, and the date, and the word alive. Then she looked up and found Eli sitting backwards on a chair by the door, hat off, watching the dark through the crack as if it were a person who might try the latch. In the morning, Clara woke to the sweet shock of coffee and the ache of being needed. Eli had left a pan of Johnny cakes warming on the stove and a note carved into a split of kindling with his knife. Back by noon. "Don't open for strangers. Call if you need me." A rope stretched from the doorpost to the cottonwood, a line to hang. Clothes. Beside the door, stacked like a promise, were seed packets, beans, squash, corn, scavenged from the general store's last season bin. She stood with Pearl at her shoulder, Jessie against her hip, and felt the tiniest filament of dignity thread itself through her day. She swept. She boiled water and ran a cloth over the twins' hair, cooing nonsense into their skin until their fists unclenched. She mended the curtain with careful stitches, turned a flour sack into a crib sheet, and when the sun shifted, she dug a garden, bed along the cabin wall where the earth was soft. Each scoop of dark soil was an argument against the river that had said she belonged to nobody. Word traveled faster than weather. By the second day, Etta May from the bakery creaked up the path, with stale loaves bound for the pigs unless you rescue them. She left with her eyes warmer than her tongue. On the third day, Reverend Hayes sent his wife with a basket and a question bright as a match. "Will you bring the babes to Sunday?" Clara's throat tightened, but she nodded because refusing felt like letting the old house of shame set itself back over her head. Not all gifts came clean. Tully Graves watched from town, a rider thick in the shoulders and thin in the eyes. He and Eli had history from the year snow lasted till April and cattle died on their feet. Tully wanted the creek rights then. Eli had stood in his way. Men didn't forget that kind of insult, and they didn't forgive a man who made them look small without firing a shot. Now Tully watched the blue curl of smoke from Eli's repaired chimney and the slight figure moving in the yard. He licked his teeth and told the boys at the Silver Star, "She ain't his wife, not even his kin. I'm only thinking of the town's soul." But the way his gaze moved said he was thinking of other things. The first time he came down the path, he came smiling. "Miss Clara," he said, touching the brim of a hat too new. "Name's Tully Graves. Dry Creek's civic spine, some would say. Brought you sugar and a spool of yellow thread. Could use a woman's fine hand up at my place. House is big, lonely, pays better than a miracle." Clara stood with Pearl against her shoulder, Jessie in the crook of her elbow, and felt both fear and fury rise. "I have work here," she said, not looking at the thread that glowed like temptation in the box. Tully leaned against the door frame he had not been invited through, smile curdling. "With Eli Callahan? Folks will talk, Miss Clara. They already are. Twins is one thing, taking up with a drifter another." "I'm not," she began, but words snagged on shame. Tully's smile read her like a thief reads a window latch. Eli's shadow crossed the yard. "You best step off my porch, Graves." Tully's eyes went flat. "Your porch? Town didn't vote you guardian of strays." Eli's voice did not rise. "A man doesn't need a vote to do what's right." The two men stood a breath apart, history crowded between them like a third body. Tully flicked a look at Clara, the way a man looks at a horse he means to break. Then he tipped his hat with 2 fingers and sauntered away, his boot heels loud in the dust. After he left, Eli didn't say "I told you so." He didn't tell her to be careful in that managing way men used. He only bent and picked up the box of sugar and thread, turned it in his hands, and asked, "Do you want it?" Clara looked at the bright spool and the white granules like snow. "I want what doesn't cost me myself." Eli nodded once, like a man told a thing he already knew. He set the box on the fence post for birds and ants to claim, and returned to mending the corral rail. The days followed each other like laundry on the rope, sun, wind, a little rain. Clara planted beans and squash. She learned the creek's talk at dusk, Pearl's sleepy whimper from Jessie's hunger cry. She wrote in the ledger each night, small victories like Pearl smiled and Jessie's grip strong, and once laughed when coffee boiled over. The garden threw up the first green spears, and she touched them the way she had touched the twins' hair, soft, awed, protective. But kindness did not keep the town from watching. At the church social, women's hands paused mid-slice over pies. A dark-haired girl whispered, "Twins are trouble." A man muttered to his friend, "Callahan takes in strays, then wonders when wolves circle." Clara stood on the edge of the yard and held her babies and tried to let the fiddle music pour like cool water over her burning skin. That night, a dead rattler lay coiled on the cabin step, mouth propped open with a stick the way boys on a dare might do. Eli's jaw went granite. He carried the thing to the far side of the clearing and burned it in a shovel with sagebrush until the stink dripped away. He didn't speak while he worked. He didn't have to. "Maybe I should go," Clara said when the twins slept, voice barely there. "Maybe I should take Pearl and Jessie and walk until the world runs out." Eli looked up from the lantern he was trimming. The light cut his face into planes, made his eyes look deeper. "Folks like Graves count on scaring a body into moving. Along. You choose to go, I'll rig the wagon. But don't let his smallness be the measure of you." His respect, the way he set the choice back in her hands, broke something open she hadn't known was still sealed. "I'm tired of running," she said. "Then stay," Eli replied. "We'll make this place answer to your name." They built small defenses of ordinary life. Clara stitched curtains from flour sacks with stitches neat as fence posts. Eli set a bell on the porch and tied a string to the hinge so she could ring for him if she saw dust coming the wrong way. He brought home a nanny goat with a stubborn temper and taught Clara to hold steady while warm milk foamed into the pail. The garden thickened, vines shouldering across the soil like they meant to own it. Jealousy shifted into malice in the shape of a match. Tully's boys, drunk on pride and whiskey, rode out late one night and circled in the cottonwoods, passing a bottle and curses that fell to the ground like seeds. Clara woke to Pearl's cry and the prickle along the back of her neck that had once saved her from a flash flood. She smelled it then, pitch and smoke, thin as a thread under the door. The first tongues of fire licked the far wall of the lean-to where they stacked cordwood. Sparks moved like fireflies that had forgotten how to be pretty. Clara pressed a hand to her mouth to hold her fear in. She lifted Jessie, tucked him into the sling, scooped Pearl, and kicked the door wide with her bare foot. "Eli!" she screamed, into the black. "Eli!" Somewhere in the dark, a horse snorted and a man swore. The bell clanged wild on its string. The night, which had been theirs, opened its teeth. The blaze spread like prairie gossip, fast, mean, and hungry. The woodpile cracked and spat embers against the side of the cabin, turning the tar-cloth roof into a red-lit threat. Clara staggered into the yard with Pearl screaming in her arms, and Jessie pressed to her chest in the sling. Smoke clawed her throat. She turned in circles, searching for Eli, heart hammering louder than the fire's roar. Then the dark split open with the pounding of hooves. Eli came thundering out of the trees, a lantern swinging in one hand, rifle across his back. His mare reared when she caught the heat, but Eli calmed her with a low growl. His eyes found Clara instantly. "Get back from the wall!" he shouted, voice rough with urgency. "Wind's pushing it this way." Clara stumbled to the far edge of the clearing, clutching the twins so tightly they squeaked. Eli threw himself from the saddle, ripped his coat off, and began smothering flames with the precision of a man who'd fought worse than fire. He cursed once when sparks leapt to his arm, but he kept beating, stamping, dragging buckets of creek, water till the smoke thinned. Then a whistle cut the night. Not the wind, not the fire, men. 3 figures broke from the tree line, shadows with rifles. Tully Graves's laugh rode the smoke like a snake. "Callahan," he called. "Didn't figure you'd fight for a woman no one wanted." Eli straightened, slowly, chest heaving, coat smoldering at the hem. He didn't lift his rifle. Not yet. "Stay where you are, Graves. This is your last warning." Tully sauntered forward, the whites of his eyes catching firelight. "Last warning? You talk like a preacher. But you ain't got the church behind you, just some river widow and her brats. Hand her over. Let the town breathe clean again." The twins whimpered. Clara's knees nearly gave, but fury steadied her spine. She stepped forward before her fear could stop her. "I am not cursed," she shouted hoarsely, "and my children are not your shame." The night went quiet enough that even the fire seemed to pause. Tully's smile faltered, then twisted. "You hear that, boys? She's got a tongue. Maybe I'll find a use for it." The rifle cracked before he finished the word. A bullet hissed into the dirt at Tully's boots. Eli had leveled his gun in one smooth motion, smoke curling from the barrel. His voice was stone. "Next one, don't aim low." For a moment, nobody moved. Even the horses shifted uneasily at the edge of the trees. Tully's men glanced between each other, whiskey courage leaking away. "You'll hang for this?" Tully spat, backing a step. "You try it," Eli said, "and you'll hang first." Something in his tone, calm, deadly sure, settled the matter. Tully's sneer collapsed into a mutter. He spat into the dirt, turned, and melted back into the trees. With his men. Only when their shadows vanished did Eli lower the rifle. He walked to Clara, set a hand on her trembling shoulder, and searched her eyes. "You all right?" Smoke stung her lungs, tears streaked her face, but she nodded. The twins whimpered against her. Eli's hand lingered, steadying. Then he turned to the fire. Together they hauled water till the last ember hissed. By dawn, the cabin stood blackened but unbroken, scarred like both of them. Exhaustion weighed heavy, but Clara couldn't stop staring at the place where Tully had stood. She whispered almost to herself, "They'll come again." "Then let them," Eli said. He holstered his rifle. "This ground's claimed, not by him, by you." The words pierced deeper than any sermon. Clara sank onto the step with Pearl in her lap, and Jessie curled against her, the rising sun painting the smoke in gold. She felt something shift in her chest, no longer only survival, but belonging. That day, as the town whispered of gunfire and firelight, Clara and Eli repaired what they could. Neighbors drifted close, cautious, bringing tools and nails as if lending them might balance the scales. Even Etta May brought a pie and muttered, "Best not let Graves win." For the first time, Clara felt the tide of judgment bend just slightly toward her side. That night, when the twins finally slept, she wrote in the ledger by lamplight. "Fire. Tried to take us. Didn't." Eli stood. I stood too. Her hand lingered over the last line. She closed the book, exhaled, and knew the river had tried to claim her once, the fire a second time. Both had failed, and she had not failed herself. The weeks after the fire unfolded with a different kind of silence. Not the silence of shame, but of watchfulness, the hush of a town waiting to see which way a story would bend. Dry Creek folks passed Clara different now. Some still muttered, but others nodded, left small offerings at her step, a bundle of kindling, a loaf, a skein of yarn. She accepted them with a lifted chin. She had been left at a river, but here she stood, on land blackened by fire, made her own again with every sweep of her broom and every stitch of her thread. Eli lingered less in town and more at the cabin. He rebuilt the lean-to stronger than before, set fence posts with a rhythm steady as a hymn. He didn't speak of Tully. Graves, but his rifle leaned near the door each night, oiled and ready. Clara felt safer because of it, but more than that, she felt stronger in herself. One evening, while the twins slept in a cradle Eli had carved from cottonwood, Clara carried the ledger outside. The moon laid silver over the creek and the young. Vines in the garden glistened with dew. She sat on the step and wrote, "Planted corn today." Pearl laughed. Jessie tried to stand. "I am still here." Eli came up behind her, carrying a bucket of water. He paused, eyes dropping to the open page. "That book'll be thicker than a Bible if you keep on." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe one day someone will read it and know we lived." His gaze lingered, soft but unwavering. "They'll know you lived. You saved those children. You faced down Graves with fire in your voice. You've done more than most." Clara swallowed hard, her throat tight. "I thought I was finished the day they left me at the river. I thought I was no one." "You were someone then," Eli said, settling beside her. "You just didn't have folks around to see it. Now you do." The air stretched warm between them. Clara looked at his hands, scarred, calloused, steady, and felt the truth of it settle deep. He hadn't tried to claim her, only stood beside her until she remembered her own strength. The twins stirred inside, their cries soft and insistent. Clara rose, but Eli caught her wrist gently. "Sit. I'll fetch them." He went in and returned with Pearl against his chest, Jessie tucked under one arm. He placed them in her lap with the care of a man handling glass. She looked at him then, truly looked, and saw not just the cowboy who had said, "Not today at the river," but the man who had carved a place where tomorrow could exist. Her heart shifted, like soil giving way for a root to grow. When Sunday came, Clara walked into the little white church with her twins in her arms. Murmurs rose, but Reverend Hayes only cleared his throat and said, "The Lord delivers to us family in all kinds of ways. Today we welcome Miss Clara and her little ones into ours." Clara sat in the back, head bowed, but she felt Eli's presence like a shield in the pew behind her. And when Pearl laughed loud enough to echo against the rafters, no one shushed her. Instead, Etta May smiled, and someone even chuckled. That evening, Clara stood in her garden, lantern light trembling over new shoots. The fire had scarred the cabin, but the green was coming anyway. She pressed her palm to the earth, the twins asleep inside, Eli humming low as he mended tack. For the first time since the river, she whispered not a prayer for survival, but a promise for the future. "I will raise them strong. I will stay." The prairie wind lifted her hair, carrying the vow into the night sky. She felt the weight of it anchor her, not like chains, but like roots. She was not drifting wood anymore. She was soil, she was shelter, she was mother. And beside her, steady as the stars, was Eli. If Clara's courage and heart touched something quiet and true inside your soul, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Out here in the wild. West, love may be hard-won, but it's always worth the fight. Join us for more stories of grit, sacrifice, and hearts that endure against all odds.